Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have a non-spoiler review of the highly anticipated Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League movie that was initially released in 2017 and it recently debuted today on March the 18th on HBO Max. Now, as I mentioned, this will be a non-spoiler review first, and then I will provide a full-on spoiler review shortly after. So all of the screenshots that I show on screen here will be shots from the trailers that we've already seen and the TV spots as well, so I won't include any shots that haven't been seen from previous footage used to promote the movie. Now, I'll just give a quick background story just in case anybody who doesn't know how this version came to existence, but if you do already know, you can probably skip the next minute or two if you want to get straight down to this review. You can also check out other reviews that I've done leading up to this version of the Zack Snyder Justice League, which includes the likes of Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and the original Justice League 2017 version. I will leave all the links within the description, and you can also check out my channel previous videos that I've covered surrounding this version of the Justice League, where I talk about the online campaign supporting it and whether it's actually worth the hype surrounding it as well. So you can check out all that content within the channel as well. So in terms of the overall setup, this 4-hour version is the original work print or assembly cut, whatever you want to call it, version of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Now, this was initially shown to the Warner Brothers executives following the recent efforts of Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman in its unfinished version, so without all of the finished CGI and rendered effects. But the executives were unhappy with the version that Zack Snyder showed to them, and I think this was due following the underperformance in the box office of Batman vs Superman, so they asked Zack Snyder to go away and rework this initial 4-hour version. So of course, while doing this, the very unfortunate tragedy of his daughter's death forced Snyder to step away from the project, and that's when Joss Whedon stepped in, making numerous rewrites and reshoots, completely changing the original tone and vision of Snyder, and the 2017 movie was released and it massively underperformed at the box office. So following that, there was a massive online campaign generated on social media supporting the Zack Snyder vision. Everybody of the fans wanted to come together to see the initial original version of what Zack Snyder had presented for the Justice League, and eventually this convinced the Warner Brothers executives to allow him to go back and finish off his original cut, with around 70 million plus aided for him to finish off all the CGI and post-production work. The other initiative of this was, of course, by releasing this on their HBO Max, they were hoping to attract a massive amount of subscribers. So after all the speculation, all the debate over its existence within the DCEU, whether this proves that it could have been succeeded had Zack Snyder just been left to his own devices, we finally arrive at the version, and we will discuss this in length within this review. Now, I think we just have to be clear first that this 4-hour version would not have been released in theatres. Just to be clear on this, whether he was left to his own devices, whether we didn't get the unfortunate tragedy within his daughter, if everything had flowed normally, then Zack Snyder still would have had to reduce this movie, and I guess it probably would have ended up being around 2.5 hours. That was the normal length, I think, of around Batman vs Superman. I think Man of Steel was around 2 hours and 20. So I generally feel if everything had been of a normal process, this would have ended up being 2.5 hours. So I think we just have to bear that in mind when we look at this overall review. So in terms of the story setup, it's still very much the same as the 2017 version, when the world is mourning the loss of Superman, whilst Bruce and Diana set about recruiting the world's most powerful heroes to stop Steppenwolf, collecting all of the mother boxes in order to take over planet Earth. Now, in terms of the sheer plot and narrative, nothing has changed in this version. It is exactly the same as what the 2017 version is. All of the main cast members for the 2017 return with their roles. So of course we have Ben Affleck as Batman, Henry Cavill as Superman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, we have Ezra Miller as The Flash, and Ray Fisher as Cyborg. All of those return, and we get a couple of surprise cameos, but I won't reveal those until we go into the spoiler review. So my overall thoughts about this Zack Snyder Justice League, I think it was okay. I know that's going to go a lot against a lot of people's public opinions. I've seen a lot of reactions and reviews online hyping this up as a masterpiece, as the best entry within the DCEU, and this is one of the best comic book movies of all time. Now, I don't share those sentiments at all. I think this was a massive undertaking. Snyder definitely swung for the fences. He put all of his energy and effort into this, fully utilising the $70 odd million that he was provided for, and he's put it out there all on screen. I think ultimately it really highlights both his strengths and his weaknesses as a filmmaker, and also his vision that has been taken for the DC heroes. Now, is it an improvement over the 2017 version? Yes, it's more consistent in its tone, it's more cohesive, and the story flows a lot more organically than what it does within the 2017 version. But then we would expect that, right? We would expect that since Zack Snyder's had a longer runtime, and again, this is furthering his vision that he's already established through Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman as well. So we would expect it to be far more consistent than the 2017 film, where Joss Whedon really had to come in at the 11th hour and make last minute chops and changes, and he was of course under the mandate of the studio keeping it under the 2 hours. So I think if you are a Snyder fan, if you love his movies, his visual style, his way of filmmaking, and you really loved the previous entries within the DCU, then you are going to love this no matter what. It has all of those same beats and sensibilities consistently with the other DCU entries, and you're going to love it. Now, if you have been against the DCU for the most part, then this will not convince you otherwise. If anything, this will actually compound your further dislike for this movies as well. So I'm going to be fair here and concentrate what was the good points about this movie. So the action sequences are extended with much better effects and CGI, and for me the two standout scenes that I took from the 2017 version, the Themyscira battle against Steppenwolf, stopping him from getting the mother boxes, and the origin invasion story when we see the unification of mankind and the Atlanteans and the gods, along with the Green Lanterns as well, fighting against the invasion of Darkseid and the Apocalypse. Both of these sequences are enhanced, they're far more intense, the spectacle is lengthened even more so, and the action is far more spectacular. So these sequences were continuing to be standout within this original version as well. Steppenwolf is a massive improvement as a villain, this time from the original 2017 version, everything from his design. And we also actually get some context and understanding in terms of his motivation. We do get further scenes where we just get to grips with the character, what he's about. I wouldn't say he's a fully layered character, certainly nowhere near the levels that were achieved with Thanos from Infinity War, but definitely his character has more presence, and at least there is far more menace, I would say, and we get multiple scenes as we see him going to various places amongst Earth and gathering more information in his relentless pursuit of the mother boxes. So there was just more about Steppenwolf, and I think that aided this movie as well. There is far more time dedicated to Cyborg and his backstory, and yes, we did get close to some emotional weight in terms of his origin on a surface level. I think there is a far more somber tone, and we get good sequences where we just see Cyborg's history. And I think Ray Fisher did a decent job in these scenes. I think Cyborg starts out strong in the first half of this movie when we focus on his backstory, and then I think he kind of falls away in the latter parts. He becomes a bit more one note and a bit overly serious, and I'll mention that later on within this review. But I did enjoy the fleshing out more of Cyborg as a character. Again, people cited that was something that was lacking within the 2017 version. Particularly the action spectacle towards the end within the climatic battle. It's not spoilerific to say that they battle off against Steppenwolf at the end of this movie, and I think the sequence here was handled and delivered far better. If you remember from the 2017 version, everything was shrouded in that very red crimson template in terms of the skylines and the backgrounds, and it never really meshed well with what was going on screen. Here we get a much more of that silver blue filter, and I think it contrasts better with the look of the characters, the Action scenes are far more coherent, as with the CGI. You can focus more a lot on what's going on. Everything moves at a very coherent pace, and I think, yeah, there was moments of excitement in terms of seeing these DC heroes battle off against Steppenwolf and the Parademons. And yes, there was a certain amount of awe towards the end of the climax. Even though things were moving at a very rapid pace at this point, there was still that certain verve and energy that you'd want to see from a massive large-scale movie like this involving the DC superheroes. There are plenty of references and cameos and scenes that will get you hyped if you are a massive fan of the DC lore and mythology, and these are things that will get you excited at the hint of a large universe. And there is many suggestions throughout this movie that they want to tell something of a bigger world. You will certainly look at each of these characters and it will get you excited and your juices flowing in terms of what could be led to be. You know, there's many scenes in here where we are clearly wanting to set up or trying to set up further sequels or further extensions of stories. So especially if you are a comic book fan and that gets you excited, you'll find a lot of pleasure in what you see in terms of the world building that was certainly hinted at throughout this movie. Now, I've said all of the highlights and the merits of this movie. Now, I do now have to concentrate on the issues and bad points, and there were quite a few throughout this movie. Now, I did mention at the start that this is a movie that highlights Zack Snyder's strengths and weaknesses as a director, and I think the weaknesses really show throughout this movie. Now, I say right now straight away that this should have been a mini-series. I think 4 hours for all of the added footage is just too long. It really is quite the endurance test to try and sit through this in one sitting. And before anybody criticizes me, no, it's not because I want an action scene every 2 minutes. Most of my favourite films ever are 3 hours plus long. If you look at Casino, JFK, the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, Scarface, The Godfather, I could go on and on. Most of my favourite films are 3 hours plus. But unlike those movies, we don't have a momentum or a verve or energy that can maintain your interest throughout the 4 hours. There still remains a massive disconnect and lack of engagement with these characters and their story. I mentioned before that the tone is consistent, but unfortunately it's the tone that we saw from Batman vs Superman, and this movie just continues the same bleak, dour vision that we saw from that movie. Everything is just stuck in this grind mark, super serious mindset, and it does become a struggle, and after a while it became a chore to try and get through and finish this movie in one setting. I mentioned before in my review of the Joss Whedon version that one of the merits of that film was that we at least got finally some signs of charm, levity and personality within his heroes. There were hints of a certain camaraderie and a banter and a nice interplay, I think, between the characters. And it just gave the movie and these characters another dimension to go through. But with this movie, there is none of that. There is such a lack of charisma and personality. Every character feels stiff and really lacking in a certain personality and vitality as we go on throughout the movie, and it just makes it a lot harder and tougher to watch. Around the 1 hour and 10 minute mark, I believe, I was really struggling to stay with the movie. You know, the Flash aside, there is no contrast between these characters. There's no appeal to them from a character perspective, and if you don't care about the characters or if you're not engaged in terms of the personality, then you are going to struggle to stay with the movie. And I really did. Really around the 2 hour mark, I was ready to check out. I was ready at this point. The movie was just labouring along. It was just muddling along. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't convoluted. I wouldn't say it was overall boring, but it was just a chore to get through. And I think that's due to the lack of personality within these characters. Now, not a lot of people are going to agree with me on this, but I really think it got to the point where I felt you could have taken these 7 actors out of their roles and put 7 other actors in their place, and it wouldn't have made any difference. And it's not because of the performances of the actors, it's just the way their characters are written. I'll now want to talk about the other aspect and major flaw within Zack Snyder's filmmaking. Now, if you analyse his movies, we all know that he's got very much of a passion in terms of the visuals. He very much likes to take these comic book pages and trying to really capture the aesthetic of the comic book panels and put them on screen. He very much favours the slow motion shots and the sequences where we see characters literally leaping from the screen, from the pages. We're zooming in and out of their facial expressions and their bodily forms and their action poses and their punches and their kicks. Zack Snyder really loves that visual style of filmmaking. Now, this can be to a benefit, but I think in terms of this movie, it really hurts. I mean, he really does overdose on the slow motion, and that is so apparent throughout the first, I would say, 50 to 55 minutes. We get multiple scenes where everything is just dragged out. You know, it feels almost less of a storytelling movie and more of a montage, right? More like we're literally looking at music videos as commercials where we're zooming in and everything is slow motion, where everybody is putting their hands in the air, or they're pointing at something, or they're walking in a certain distance. Everything is just slow motion and it's dragging on, and it really does affect the pace of this movie. You stand back and I thought to myself, what am I really watching here? Am I actually watching a narrative unfold? Am I watching, you know, a music video? And everything is this montage, and he puts in so many musical scores and soundtrack, and sometimes the music even felt uneven. Sometimes we would get this zippy pop song soundtrack, and other times we would get this really grinding rock heavy fusion of grunge rock style soundtrack, and it really felt out of place, out of tune with the action sequences and the drama that we were seeing on screen here. Also, to mention the fact that this is a 4-hour movie, and there are many sequences that you can clearly see that needed to be cut even further. I can even go back on this movie and I look at certain aspects and I can understand why Joss Whedon cut certain elements. I can understand why he put in certain elements of his own style within this movie. We get certain sequences, and I don't think it's too spoilerific when I say this. For example, the first couple of scenes where we see Ben Affleck's Batman making his way to see Aquaman to try and recruit him into the Justice League. Now, the 2017 version just had to show him up in town, and then straight away we go into him talking to Arthur Curry. Here we get a long trek within the mountains, and he's on his horseback. There's no dialogue, there's just no reason for this sequence to be dragged on for so long before we get to the more important stuff of him conversing with Arthur. We have another example, which again, non-spoilerific because we knew this from the 2017 movie, where we get the bank robbery scene where we see the emergence of Wonder Woman for the first time. And again, everything is just dragged out for so long. Everything is just tried to develop needlessly. We just spend too much time before we get into the action sequences, and it's not a case of there's a certain build up in tension or suspense. It's just long elongated scenes of Wonder Woman standing on the building or looking down in the sky or floating up in the air, and it just goes on and on and on, and it really makes the film drag out for longer than what was really unnecessary. And this is something that goes on really throughout the whole film. There's another sequence involving the Flash that is, I mean, it takes slow motion to a new level. It really does. And it just drags on, and it's not exciting, it's not tense, it's not spectacular, it's just boring. You know, you watch these sequences and think, why are we taking so long? Even the good stuff with the cyborg backstory, it just moves at such a plodding pace, and it really affects the momentum and the energy of the film. And it you are talking about a 4-hour movie. Now, I'm not saying there has to be an action sequence every 2 minutes just to maintain interest, but having these extended slow motion sequences just doesn't help, and it just really was taking my energy and enthusiasm away. And this is Zack Snyder, and here he really overdosed on the slow motion, and it proved to be to the film's detriment. And unfortunately, along with the bleak, dour tone, this really at times was a joyless experience. You know, it was a soulless experience at times. Along with the lack of personality and engagement with the characters, I think this is something that, if you have no investment within the DCU, if this is your first viewing experience of the DCU, I think you may struggle to finish it. I really do, because you won't have any investment of these characters anyway if you are a fan of these movies. So if you were going in just cold turkey, then I really think you would struggle to engage and maintain yourself throughout this movie. For all the action, for all the spectacle on screen, I just think, again, the lack of engagement with the characters, the overdosing on slow-mo, all those visual beats where Zack Snyder is literally putting comic panels on screen, it just made this 4-hour version seem even longer at times. And like I mentioned at the start of this video, I actually think, much like what we got with the Blade Runner film, if you remember, we had, I think it was 5 versions, I actually think that there could be a superior 2.5-hour cut to this movie. I think it would enhance the viewing experience better if we just got rid of all of the bloats, just all of the prolonged sequences. And we get these odd moments as well when we have this wailing music in the background as we see characters flying through the air, particularly of Wonder Woman. I don't know why. We still get the theme music from her original movie and Batman vs Superman, and I liked her original theme music, but we just get this really wailing music in the background. There's another sequence at the beginning where we get a group of people singing in almost like a choir like fashion, and again, it's just overloaded, it's just overblown, it's just too much. It's too much. And I think Snyder is somebody like Tarantino, where if there's not somebody editing him, if there's not someone reining in him, if you give him just full reign, then it just becomes too much. It just becomes overindulgent, where you have a filmmaker more at odds with what he wants to show rather than trying to engage an audience. And I think, like Tarantino, Snyder is guilty of that, and that's something that runs through this movie entirely. In terms of Superman himself, you know, he looks cool in a black suit, very good in terms of the visuals that we see, but most of the story beats is literally what we've already seen in the 2017 movie. Thank God they don't have to have the horrible CGI moustache effects that we saw in Joss Whedon's version. But even still here, the opening scene that we get with Superman, it is borderline still on the ridiculous, overblown hyperbolics that we associate with this movie. But yeah, Superman is just there, he does what he does, he functions, nothing too special. So again, nothing in terms of truly something exceptional in terms of Superman. Ben Affleck's Batman is just there, he says the right things, getting a team together, nothing too bad. List of a jokey Batman from what we saw in Joss Whedon, but nothing too distinctive either. Wonder Woman, Aquaman, they're all okay. The Flash, I still don't like this version of Ezra Miller. I don't like the nerdy, jokey approach. I just think it just takes away so much from the film, and it's really inconsistent in terms of its tone. Even though I've complained about the seriousness, the over nerdy approach of the Flash just doesn't really work, you know, in terms of the comic relief, which is clearly what he's designed by as well. Some of the overall aesthetic and the way that the Flash runs is still very awkward looking overall as well. So I'm less enthusiastic about the Flash movie that is coming in 2022. And we do get an epilogue at the end, so I won't spoil it, but essentially there will be the nightmare sequence that you've already seen throughout the trailers, and of course there will be the end credits, which you already saw in terms of the original Joss Whedon version as well. So other than that, there aren't really too much surprises. It's still the same story for the 2017 version. From the trailers, we all know Darkseid makes the appearance, but that's not a lot really to write home about, and I will talk about it more on the spoilers. So that was another very disappointing aspect for me as well. But overall, as I mentioned before, if you are a fan of the Snyderverse, you are going to be very happy about this, and nothing I say in this review when I talk about the bad points will convince you otherwise. Also, as opposed, if you are someone who hates the DCU, then nothing I've said in this review in terms of the positive aspects will convince you otherwise either. I want to see this wrapped up now. I don't want to see any more continuation of this universe. People got what they wanted. I think we are going to reach the end now. Zack Snyder is going away to do his Army of the Dead Netflix adaptation. I think he's got aspirations to do a King Arthur movie as well. I can't see Warner Brothers going back and giving him further opportunities to expand this universe unless they get a massive upsurge in subscribers. So overall, if I had to give this a rating, I gave the 2017 a 5.1 out of 10. So I'm going to give this a 5.8 out of 10. All the epic, all the spectacle, it's all there put on the screen in terms of a visual representation, improved tone, improved consistency, and improved cohesiveness, but still all of the same problems that fell over from Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman are unfortunately doubled down within this movie here, and it really was a grind at times to get through. And like I said, it, for the most part, apart from the action sequences and the climatic battle, it really just is a joyless and soulless experience at times, and just undermines and underlines all of the potential problems that we saw right throughout the DCU. And it doesn't convince me in any way, shape or form that this would have been a massive box office hit had it been released in a reduced form within cinemas. And I think now I just want to draw a close under the Zack Snyder'S, and I think maybe in 5 years or 10 years time we need to reboot and start again with these DC characters and make sure we get them right individually first before we talk about any shared universe or crossover movies overall. So those are my thoughts and feelings on the Zack Snyder Justice League version. I know this has been proved to be very unpopular. I've already had very heated debates with some people on Twitter about my initial reactions towards this 4-hour version. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm sure many of you will disagree with my thoughts and opinions. As I mentioned before, I will provide a spoiler review shortly after this, when I'll just give an overall rounded view of some of the elements that we saw, and particularly the cameos and the appearances that we saw throughout this movie as well. So that's it for now. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please hit those like and subscribe and notification buttons and help me grow more content for you in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.